Hello, today I'm going to be talking about the Muzzle Loader Lab that was sent to me from SDI. It is a Traditions Shenandoah rifle. As you can see here, it's complete. It's just going to be put together during the course of this video as I talk through the processes that I went through. Alright, so the first thing that came about was the unboxing of the packaging, which I'll show a picture of here. After that, made sure all the pieces were there so I would be able to essentially put the rifle together without any issues. They were fortunately all there, so I began fitting everything together. I started with the hammer and lock here, which will be the first thing that I put in here. The hammer and lock was the first thing that I put together because it is the most important part to fit. It's held on with these two screws, and there's a small spring that is inserted in here with a little finagling that allows retention to be kept on the cleaning rod or field rod. Each one of these screws is a brass washer that keeps the screw from impacting the side of the muzzle loader to keep it to leave it with a really nice clean look. In order to fit the hammer lock, I used some inletting black on the back side of the hammer lock, and when you use inletting black you need to be very cognizant of a nice even thin layer. So you apply that to the back side of the part that you're fitting into the stock, and as you place that in, the inletting black will stay on all the high parts that need to be trimmed down using some hand tools, like the scrapers that were also sent to me from SDI. So after a couple of rounds of inletting black and scraping down, the hammer fit in like a glove. After that, I started working the brass pieces. At this time, I did a rough sand down, and I used some files which were sent with another class to really get into the small corners of the brass pieces in order to really shine them up and make the brass look, have a very polished look to it. After that, after I polished up all my brass pieces, I moved on to the trigger and the trigger guard, which is a giant piece of brass, which I'll insert now. So the trigger goes in first. It should be flush with this, it's got a little forward edge here that should remain flush with the this section of the stock. Okay, I'm just gonna screw it in. It only has one screw because when the tang screw is installed for the barrel, it'll actually screw in through the top and connect in to that section of the trigger. After that, put the hand guard in, or the trigger guard in, which is retained with two screws. This was also had to be fitted in using inletting black and the scrapers. And as you can see, after a good sanding job and after a little bit of fitting, it really does seat pretty flush to the stock, which is really what you're going for. After that, I worked on the brass plate on the buttstock, which had a little bit of material from the stock that needed to be removed. Then came the time for the fitting of the actual plate located at the very back of the stock. So the first thing that needed to be done with that was it needed to be sanded down where the metal touches the wood to get a nice smooth finish, and then a little bit of the rear of the stock was marked with inletting black again, and excess wood was removed from the stock to get a really nice fit and finish for the brass plate on the rear, which I'm currently screwing in right now. Once I got both the bottom plate and the back plate where I wanted them in terms of fit, I then took a grinder, a little bench grinder, and grinded down the two portions to match up, to make for a smooth, almost an appearance of a single brass plate connecting the entire buttstock. After that, I worked my way up to the thimbles, which hold the rod in place. Did a little bit of fitting and then had to drill a hole to mount the thimbles to, which was surprisingly easy. The rear thimble, the one closest to the buttstock, did not have a hole pre-drilled into it, so I had to drill through the stock and the thimble itself. I also needed to lower a bit of the bed for the barrel so that the screw could actually make it through the stock and make a good tight fit on the thimble. So that's the rearmost thimble. The thimble that mounts towards the front, however, had a already had a screw hole inserted into it, so it made it pretty easy. Just drilling a hole through the stock to line it up. Doing this, I also had to install the pinions on the bottom of the barrel, which I did using a punch and a hammer. Pretty simple. If you've ever done anything like swapped out the sights on a pistol, which is pretty common, that's what it really reminded me of. Very slow and steady taps until it's about right, and then using the micrometer, I just made sure that it was even on both sides, more or less. I got a little bit more precise when it came to the sights just to make sure that they were perfectly even. Also had to put 2 holes into the front end cap, shown here. I did a good sanding down job. I inserted the barrel just to make sure, which I'm going to do right now, that everything fitted together nice and tight. A little bit more precise fitting, which involved a lot of sanding down. It involved some hits with a hammer. We got that in. It's time for final screw. Well, I'm screwing this in. Talk about the more of the finishing processes that was done to make sure that everything works and feels good and looks good. So I added a light stain on top of the stock. It's actually a stain called gun stock, so I felt like that was pretty appropriate. After the stain was left to dry, I hit it with very, very fine grit sandpaper, and then I applied some polyurethane semi-gloss finish. I know it's not period correct, but it's what I had, and should help to protect the muzzle loader. I also hit my operating rod with a coat of ebony stain to give it a little contrasting offset. For the barrel, I used a cold bluing solution, which was fairly simple. It was applied by cotton pad, applied to it cold, no heating required. Every 3 hours I had to rinse off and card the rust to keep it from pitting the barrel. And now that it's all complete, you can kind of see that it gave it a very dark, deep brown look, which I really like. Once that was done, using the same method as the barrel pinions, I pounded the front and rear sight into position and then used a micrometer to line them up so they're straight. So as for the functions check portion of this, with the hammer fully cocked back, I'm going to go ahead and pull the prep trigger and then pull the hair trigger that is the primary trigger. Yep, goes off, half cock works, full cock works, and just so you can see, the nipple is properly aligned with the hammer.